afternoon, chaps. I'm going to be making some focaccia today, which is an Italian based bread. I'm doing that because I need us to focus on the nutritional qualities that we find with the bread, but most of all the function of ingredients, and in particular we're going to be focusing on the function of yeast as it's a raising agent. So basically, to make our focaccia we've got flour. You can use a plain flour by all means. Don't use self-raising flour because that already contains a raising agent, and I'll come to that and explain what that is a little bit more in a minute. But I'm going to be using a bread flour. The reason I'm using a strong white bread flour is it contains gluten, and as we know, gluten is the protein we find in flour. Now the great thing about gluten is it makes our products, our food, stretch and become more pliable, which is essential within the bread production. If you don't have a stretchy bread, then it becomes quite dense and heavy. But plain flour is fine within this type of bread that we're using, making a focaccia, but most of the breads it would be a strong plain flour that we use. Now, strong plain flour has 20% more gluten in to other breads, so that's why it's really good. However, we know if you're a celiac or somebody with is gluten intolerant, you would have to use an alternative flour, something like a rice flour maybe, or just a gluten-free flour. Okay, so to start off with, I've got 170 grams of my flour, and I'm just going to put it into my mixing bowl ready. We always start off with dry ingredients in there. So we know that my flour is high in gluten. It's not a self-raising flour, so there's no raising agent in it yet. And basically the raising agent we're going to be using is yeast, okay? Yeast is a natural organism, okay? It's a living organism, whereas in self-raising flour, it's got a chemical raising agent. This is a natural raising agent. Other raising agents you can have are things like mechanical, where you whisk something so it adds air into it to help to make it rise. But yeast is a biological raising agent, and that's found in all bread produce, okay? It's the thing that makes it rise, okay? So to that, I'm going to be adding 7 grams of yeast, and that is 1 sachet of this particular yeast I've got here. I got this from my corner shop. You can get it from all supermarkets around as well. It's something that you'll be able to access quite easily. Now, there is no expectation that you are to go away and make this actual bread. It's about you understanding the ingredients that go into it. So my yeast is going in here. Now, the yeast is the thing that's going to make my bread rise, okay? That's really, really important because there's no self-raising, there's no baking powder in there, which you would use in a cake or something like that. So the yeast is the thing that's going to make it rise. Now, this is a key point. For yeast to work and make our bread rise and become fluffy and have a great texture, it needs certain conditions, okay? Certain controls, we call them. So it needs warmth, it needs time, it needs moisture, and it needs food. So the way that we're going to give it those things are, we're going to add some sweetness in. Now that sweetness tends to be sugar, and that sugar helps to feed the yeast, okay? Now I'm going to add honey into mine, okay, and I'm adding half a teaspoon of honey. Now that is going to go into some water over here, and I've got warm water. Now the reason it's warm, as I just said, yeast needs a warm condition to work with. So I've got 170 millilitres of warm water there, and I'm going to add half a teaspoon of yeast, okay? I'm not adding it straight in with my yeast mixture, because if you add too much sugar or too much salt into it, it can actually end up killing the yeast, so we don't want that to happen. I'm also going to add in some oil into there, so I'm going to add a tablespoon of oil into my mixture. Now, as I said, yeast needs warmth, time, moisture and food. So we've got the warmth and we've got the moisture from our water, we've got our food, but the only thing we've not got there is time. And this little bit of warm water isn't going to do enough, so we're going to have to add more heat to it in a minute. Now, the reason it needs all these conditions is because what we want the yeast to do is produce a gas, and that gas is carbon dioxide. Now, yeast cannot produce that gas without these conditions that we've just discussed or we've just talked about, okay? So it's really, really important that that gas is produced, because basically what happens is, as the bread starts to activate, okay, and the yeast starts to activate, it produces a condition called fermentation, a process called fermentation, and that is when yeast produces carbon dioxide. And what happens is the bread starts to produce carbon dioxide, it starts to rise and grow, and lots of little air pockets and bubbles will then form within the bread, and that's where you get that really nice, moist, soft bread. Now we're doing a really aerated bread, which is focaccia. It's also got lots of flavour to it because we're adding extra things like oil into it and to enrich it. I'm also going to be adding some thyme, which is a herb. I'm going to be adding garlic because garlic and Italian food always go really well, and I'm going to be adding some rock salt. But focaccia you can flavour in any way that you want. You could do a cheesy focaccia, you could do a spicy chili focaccia. There's all different ways that could happen. So over here I've got my flour and yeast, then I've got my warm water, I've got my oil, I've got my honey. Now what's going to happen now is I'm going to add my wet into my dry, okay? And that's just going to go in there and I'm going to mix it through. Now it should be quite a wet dough. All bread dough should be relatively wet. Just move that out of the way, okay? And you want to mix it through till it starts to form. Now this is quite a sticky dough, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to put a small amount of flour. Now not too much flour, chaps. Okay, we want to make sure it's a small amount because we don't want to dry the actual bread out. So a small amount of flour, as you can see, onto it. Now it's really sticky, so you're going to use your wooden spoon to tip it out onto the actual worktop or chopping board, whatever you're using. Put that to one side. I'm going to move that out of the way so my dog doesn't have a nibble on that. Okay. Then, because it's sticky, a little bit of flour in your hands as well. That's really key. Okay. I have washed and sanitised my hands prior to doing this. Okay. I'm going to give it a good knead. Now, kneading is essential because we know that our bread has got gluten in it and we want to stretch that gluten. The more you can knead your bread, the stretchier and the moister and the less dense your bread will be. Now to knead, we push with the palm of our hand and we fold it back. Palm of our hands, fold it back. It will stick to your hands. It is a bit, gacky at times, but you want to stretch it. You want to get all that gluten in there done. You should really be kneading your bread for about 5 minutes to get it to the correct texture that you need it to be. Now you don't want to watch me knead for 5 minutes. So I'm going to show you the next stage and then I'll come back and knead afterwards. So once we've kneaded it out and we've stretched all that gluten, you can get yourself a cake tin. That's perfectly fine to use, or something like a frying pan, okay, that's quite large and round. And I'm going to use a bit of my oil to grease up my actual dish. Don't be using butter, okay, because this is an oily bread, so it doesn't make any sense to be using something like butter, but you want to make sure that you've got plenty of oil in the bottom of there. And all we're going to do now is we're going to place it into the bottom of our tin, and with your fingers, you're going to push it out to the sides of the tin. Now, because it's got gluten in, excuse me, it will want to spring back. So you're going to have to use your hands to push it all to the sides. Don't give up, it will keep springing back, but as you keep pushing it, the gluten will stretch and so will your bread. Okay, so I'm going to spread that out. Now, it's quite a flat bread at this point, okay? It's not going to be a completely flat bread, but it won't be a loaf. Okay, it's slightly different to a loaf that we're doing here, but it is going to rise. So if we can see, chaps, it completely fills up my tin now. What is really important is that we flavour our focaccia, but we don't need to do that till later. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to drizzle a bit of oil over the top, and then I'm going to put it in a warm place. Okay, that warm place is essential because we know that our bread, for it to produce carbon dioxide, ferment and rise to get it to the correct texture before we cook it, okay, we've got to leave it to prove, okay? Proving is when you leave bread in a warm place for a period of time to help that fermentation to take place. We know that bread needs moisture, warmth, time and food. So time is the key bit that we're going to now. So I've got that really well oiled up. It's completely done. I'm just going to get a wet tea towel and I'm going to put it somewhere warm for about 20 minutes, okay? And then we'll come back to it. So I've left my bread to prove for 20 minutes and now it's really well aerated. It's like almost like marshmallowy in texture. It's really stringy and it's got like lots of air pockets in it. It's a bit like a pillow almost. It's like pillowed up inside my tin. I know it's a little bit hard to see. That's the texture we're looking for. So that means my CO2 started to produce and my fermentation is produced. Now the great thing about this dish is that it's a good source of carbohydrates because we've got the white flour in there. It's a simple carbohydrate, so it's a quick release in energy. It's got unsaturated fat, so it's not full of saturated fat. So our unsaturated fats are things like oils that reduce our chance of cholesterol. Our saturated fats are things like butters, which increase our chance of cholesterol, and they cause things like heart attacks. It's got a natural sugar in it, which is an unrefined sugar rather than a refined sugar. So natural sugars are unrefined. They are reducing our chance of things like tooth decay, increased onset of things like type 2 diabetes or obesity. A refined sugar was something like castor sugar that we add into our cups of tea or into our cereal. They're the ones that cause us more issues with things like tooth decay. I'm going to be adding thyme into it. Thyme is a herb. It's in there purely to improve the sensory qualities of it, to add flavour, to add aroma, to add texture. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to pour some oil over the top. Again, it's an unsaturated fat. It's an oily bread, so you want to have lots of oil over the top. You don't want to drown it, but a good drizzle over the top. I've got some chopped garlic over here that I've already prepared. My chopped garlic I'm going to sprinkle over the top. We know garlic already is a medicinal quality. It's really good, helps with your inflammation of bowels, helps with clearing you out, okay? They use it in a lot of food around the world, and it has those medicinal qualities that help with your digestion, okay? So I'm just going to sprinkle them across the top, okay? So I'm doing a garlicky one. If you've got something like garlic salt in at home, you could use something like that. Also, if you have that cheats garlic, where it's in a tub, which I love personally, something like that is great to sprinkle on the top as well. You could be really good, when you're kneading your bread earlier on, you could knead your garlic into it then and your herbs into it then, but I'm choosing to put them on the top, okay? But if you want to do that, say you're doing a cheese one, when you're kneading and stretching that gluten earlier on, you might have grated a bit of cheese onto your worktop and kneaded that in. I'm going to sprinkle some of my thyme on the top, not too much, it is quite a strong herb, okay, but we want to give that aromatic flavour to it. And then if we look, I've got I'm going to bring it a bit closer. Okay, I've got my garlic, I've got my herbs on top. It's got that nice pillowy texture. And now that's going to go inside the oven for about 10 minutes. It will get even more pillowy. It will go really golden brown because we've got that unsaturated fat in there, okay, from the oil. And we should end up with a really crisp texture. It is not going to fill the pan, okay? It's about this thickness, okay, in total. It's not a loaf, as I said earlier. But what we're looking for is a golden brown colour, and when we take it out the tin, when we tap the bottom, it should sound hollow. That means it's cooked all the way through, okay? So I'm going to pop that in the oven now. My bread has been in the oven for around 20 minutes. It's really golden brown. I really wish you could smell it because it smells amazing. So I'm just going to turn it out and show you the final outcome. It has risen, okay? So I've got oven gloves on because I'm being really careful because I'm taking it out of a bottomless tin. I'll just slide it onto my bench. I'll move that across to show you. Move that out of the way. And if I can just bring this back now. Out of the way. If we look, here's my final outcome. So I'm going to slice it up. Actually, bring it a little bit closer. Can we see? It's got that really nice golden brown finished on it. Okay, let's move that. So I'm going to slice this into pieces so you can see the outcome now. Without dropping it this time. Okay, so I'm going to slice it up. It should be really crispy on the top. Okay. We can see all that steam, but if we look at the centre of that, look at all these air pockets that have been produced because of that carbon dioxide that's in there, that's been produced during fermentation. So I've got a really well aerated bread. It's got a golden brown finish on it, really crispy outer shell, perfect focaccia. You can have that with some garlic mayonnaise, a garlic aioli. You can have it with some hummus. You can eat it just on its own. It's great with soup. Okay, you might just make it into like a garlic bread and have it with your pasta. Okay, so it's a great side dish, but I can't wait to tuck in and eat my final outcome of my focaccia that I've produced. I promise you I won't drop it this time. Okay, wonderful. Enjoy, boys. Next thing you need to do is you will have a quiz attached to your documents. Everything that we've discussed in this session will appear in your quiz, and then I'll grade and mark it and get back to you. Okay, speak to you all soon. Bye.